The landing craft drops its ramp at 0630 hours. November 1st, 1945. First Lieutenant Robert Mitchell, 27th Infantry Regiment, 25th Infantry Division, jumps into chest-deep water off Miyazaki Beach, southeastern Kyushu. Machine gun fire erupts immediately from concrete pillboxes 300 yards inland. The beach slopes gently. No cover exists between waterline and the seawall 400 yards ahead. Mitchell runs forward through the water, his M1 Garand rifle held high. Around him, men fall. The Japanese gunners fire interlocking patterns across predetermined killing zones. They have had 4 months to prepare these defenses. Mitchell reaches knee-deep water. Mortar rounds begin impacting along the beach. The Japanese have ranged every yard of this approach. Mitchell counts 6 explosions within 50 feet. Shrapnel hisses through the air. He reaches the beach proper and goes to ground behind a low berm of sand. Machine gun fire chews the sand inches above his head. He cannot advance. He cannot retreat. The landing craft that delivered him already withdraws, heading back to the transport ships to collect the next wave. He looks left and right. Bodies float in the surf. Bodies lie motionless on the sand. Bodies crouch behind inadequate cover exactly like him. The bombardment that preceded the landing, 3 days of naval gunfire and airstrikes, appears to have achieved minimal effect. The Japanese defenses remain intact, manned by soldiers who have waited months for this moment. This scene, viscerally imagined by planners in the summer of 1945, never occurs, but the planning proceeds to extraordinary detail. Operation Downfall, the projected invasion of Japan, represents the largest amphibious operation ever contemplated. It divides into 2 phases. Operation Olympic, the invasion of Kyushu scheduled for November 1st, 1945, and Operation Coronet, the invasion of Honshu near Tokyo scheduled for March 1st, 1946. To understand how American military planners arrived at projections suggesting millions of casualties, you must return to April 1945. The battle for Okinawa rages. American forces, having landed April 1st, face fanatical Japanese resistance. Every ridge, every cave, every village requires assault by infantry supported by tanks, flamethrowers, and artillery. Progress measures in yards per day. Casualties accumulate relentlessly. By April 30th, 1 month into the Okinawa campaign, American forces suffer 20,000 casualties, 5,000 killed, 15,000 wounded. Japanese casualties exceed 50,000, mostly killed. The ratio, 4 Japanese dead for each American casualty, proves consistent with previous Pacific campaigns, but the absolute numbers trouble planners. Okinawa, measuring approximately 60 miles long and 18 miles wide, garrisoned by approximately 70,000 Japanese troops, costs 20,000 American casualties in 30 days. Japan itself measures approximately 1,000 miles long, averages 200 miles wide, and holds garrison forces estimated at 2.3 million regular troops plus 28 million civilian militia trained for basic combat. The arithmetic proves stark. If Okinawa's casualty rates prevail, invading Japan will cost casualties in the millions. The Joint Chiefs of Staff direct the Joint War Plans Committee to prepare detailed invasion plans in April 1945. The committee, led by Brigadier General George Lincoln, begins work immediately. The planning requires coordinating ground forces, naval forces, air forces, logistics, and intelligence across unprecedented scale. The first decision involves targeting. Intelligence evaluates potential landing sites across Japan. The analysis considers beach gradients, defensive terrain, road networks, airfield locations, and proximity to strategic objectives. 2 locations emerge as optimal: Kyushu, the southernmost main island, and Honshu, the main island containing Tokyo. The plan develops in phases. Phase 1, Operation Olympic. Invade southern Kyushu with 14 divisions, approximately 540,000 troops. Objectives include securing airfields to support subsequent operations, establishing lodgment for supply buildup, and drawing Japanese forces south away from Honshu. Target date, November 1st, 1945. To precede the winter monsoon season. Phase 2, Operation Coronet. Invade Honshu's Kanto Plain with 25 divisions, approximately 1 million troops. Objectives include capturing Tokyo, destroying Japanese government, and forcing surrender. Target date, March 1st, 1946. after weather improves following winter. The Olympic plan details specify landing zones along Kyushu's southeast, south, and west coasts. 6th Army, under General Walter Kruger, commands the operation. Forces include 1st Cavalry Division, 25th Infantry Division, 33rd Infantry Division, 41st Infantry Division, 77th Infantry Division, 81st Infantry Division, 98th Infantry Division, Americal Division, 2nd Marine Division, 3rd Marine Division, 5th Marine Division, plus supporting units. Total ground combat strength, approximately 476,000 troops in the assault echelons. Naval forces include 42 aircraft carriers, 24 battleships, 400 destroyers, and over 3,000 landing craft and support vessels. This fleet, designated 5th Fleet under Admiral Raymond Spruance, dwarfs any previous naval operation. Total personnel afloat exceed 500,000. Air forces include approximately 6,700 aircraft, B-29s for strategic bombing, B-24s and B-25s for tactical support, fighters for air superiority and ground attack, transports for supply and airborne operations. The air campaign plan calls for preliminary bombardment beginning August 1st, intensifying through October, climaxing with maximum effort immediately preceding the landings. The logistics prove staggering. Supplying 540,000 troops in combat requires delivering approximately 42,000 tons of supplies daily: food, ammunition, fuel, medical supplies, replacement equipment. The plan calls for establishing supply bases in Okinawa, the Philippines, and Marianas. Ships will shuttle supplies continuously. The logistical tail, including base personnel and support troops, totals over 1 million personnel. But the most critical planning element involves casualty estimates. The planners examine previous campaigns seeking patterns. Iwo Jima, 19,000 American casualties from 70,000 troops engaged, 27% casualty rate. Okinawa, projected 49,000 American casualties from 183,000 troops engaged, 27% casualty rate by campaign end in June. Luzon, 38,000 American casualties from 220,000 troops engaged, 17% casualty rate. These rates, applied to Olympics' 540,000 troops, suggest casualties ranging from 90,000 to 145,000. But this assumes Japanese defensive capability remains constant. Intelligence indicates otherwise. The intelligence picture assembled through April and May 1945 reveals Japanese preparations proceeding at alarming pace. Magic intercepts, decoded Japanese military communications, show massive troop movements toward Kyushu. Japanese forces, recognizing Kyushu as likely invasion target, concentrate forces there. By June, intelligence estimates Japanese strength on Kyushu at approximately 350,000 troops, 5 times the initial estimates from March. The defensive preparations prove equally concerning. Japanese forces construct thousands of fortified positions, concrete pillboxes, underground bunkers, cave systems, tunnels connecting positions. They stockpile ammunition and supplies in dispersed caches. They pre-position artillery to cover landing beaches. They mine approaches extensively. They train civilian militia in basic combat and suicide attacks. One intelligence report from June 15th proves particularly troubling. Photo reconnaissance of Miyazaki Beach, a primary landing zone, reveals defensive preparations including over 150 pillboxes per mile of beach, extensive minefields, underwater obstacles, pre-ranged artillery positions, and cave systems extending inland from the beach. The defenses exceed anything encountered at Iwo Jima or Okinawa. The planners revise casualty estimates accordingly. A Joint Chiefs of Staff paper dated June 18th projects Olympic casualties at approximately 105,000 in the first 90 days, 25,000 killed, 75,000 wounded, 5,000 missing. This assumes a 20% casualty rate against heavier opposition than previously encountered. But some planners argue these estimates prove optimistic. General Douglas MacArthur's staff produces an estimate suggesting 125,000 casualties in the first 4 months. Admiral William Leahy, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, privately expresses concern that casualties could reach 250,000 or higher. The debate intensifies through June. President Harry Truman, in office only since April 12th following Roosevelt's death, demands clear casualty projections before approving the operation. A meeting occurs June 18th at the White House. Present: Truman, Secretary of War Henry Stimson, Secretary of Navy James Forrestal, General George Marshall, Admiral Ernest King, Admiral Leahy, and Assistant Secretary of War John McCloy. Marshall presents the Olympic plan. He projects 105,000 casualties in the first 90 days based on Luzon ratios. He notes that Japanese troop strength on Kyushu exceeds previous estimates, but argues the operation remains feasible. King supports the plan, emphasizing naval superiority and air support. Leahy expresses skepticism, citing Okinawa's 27% casualty rate and suggesting Olympic might produce similar or higher rates. Truman asks directly, "What will this operation cost in American lives?" The answers vary. Marshall: 105,000 casualties in 90 days. King: similar to Luzon, approximately 80,000 to 120,000. Leahy: potentially as high as Okinawa, 35% casualty rate, meaning 190,000 casualties. The meeting produces no decision. Truman directs continued planning, but approval remains contingent on further intelligence. The implicit question hangs unstated. At what cost does invasion become unacceptable? The planning continues through July. Olympic assumes final form. Detailed timetables specify landing sequences, artillery support, air missions, logistics delivery, everything required for coordinating the largest amphibious operation in history. The plan runs to thousands of pages, but underlying every page, the casualty estimates that vary by 100,000 depending on assumptions. Simultaneously, coronet planning proceeds. The Honshu invasion plan envisions even larger forces: 8th Army under General Robert Eichelberger and 1st Army under General Courtney Hodges, totaling approximately 1 million assault troops. Landing zones include beaches east and south of Tokyo. Objectives include encircling and capturing the capital, destroying Japanese government and military command, forcing unconditional surrender. The coronet casualty estimates prove even more speculative. Japanese forces on Honshu number approximately 1 million troops according to June intelligence. Civilian militia numbers reach 15 million potentially. The defensive preparations, if given until March 1946, could exceed Kyushu's preparations substantially. Planners project coronet casualties ranging from 200,000 to 500,000, depending on assumptions about Japanese will to resist. Some estimates suggest the Japanese might surrender after losing Kyushu, making coronet unnecessary. Others argue Japanese culture and military tradition ensure resistance continues regardless of losses. The total casualty projection for Olympic plus coronet ranges from 300,000 to over 1 million American casualties. Japanese casualties, military and civilian combined, could reach 10 million or higher. These numbers, almost incomprehensible, drive the desperate search for alternatives. One alternative emerges through July: the atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project, developing nuclear weapons since 1942, approaches completion. Testing occurs July 16th at Trinity Site in New Mexico. The test succeeds, producing explosion equivalent to 20,000 tons of TNT. Two bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man, exist in usable form. The decision calculus becomes stark. Continue conventional operations including potential invasion, accepting casualties potentially exceeding 1 million American and 10 million Japanese, or employ atomic weapons, accepting unknown casualties but potentially forcing surrender without invasion. Truman receives briefing on the atomic bomb's capabilities in late July while at Potsdam Conference. The briefing describes blast effects, radiation effects, projected casualties. One bomb, dropped on a Japanese city, could kill 100,000 people instantly. The horror proves difficult to comprehend, but compared against casualty projections for invasion, the arithmetic suggests the bomb might save lives overall, American and Japanese combined. The Potsdam Declaration issues July 26th, demanding Japanese unconditional surrender and warning of prompt and utter destruction if Japan refuses. Japan rejects the ultimatum July 2080. The path toward atomic weapons employment appears clear, but the invasion planning continues. Until Japan surrenders, Operation Downfall remains the default strategy. The buildup proceeds. Troops transfer from Europe to Pacific. Equipment ships to forward bases. Supplies stockpile. Ships assemble. Aircraft deploy. The massive machinery of invasion preparation operates at full intensity. At 0800 hours on August 6th, 1945. A B-29 bomber named Enola Gay drops little boy atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The explosion kills approximately 70,000 people instantly. Tens of thousands more die subsequently from radiation and injuries. The city ceases to exist as functioning entity. Japan does not surrender immediately. Debate within Japanese government intensifies but produces no consensus. The military faction argues for continuing resistance. August 9th. A second atomic bomb, Fat Man, destroys Nagasaki, killing approximately 40,000 instantly. Additionally, on August 9th, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan and invades Manchuria with overwhelming force. Soviet forces, numbering 1.5 million troops with 5,000 tanks, sweep through Japanese defenses. The Kwantung Army, once Japan's premier fighting force, collapses within days. These combined shocks, two atomic bombs and Soviet invasion, finally break the deadlock. Emperor Hirohito intervenes directly, ordering acceptance of surrender terms. The announcement occurs August 15th. Japan surrenders unconditionally. The war ends. Operation Downfall, meticulously planned, extensively prepared, becomes unnecessary. The casualties avoided remain forever unknowable. Definitive statements prove impossible, but examining the detailed planning permits informed speculation. Olympic, had it proceeded November 1st, would have encountered Japanese forces substantially stronger than estimated in June. Intelligence through August reveals Japanese troop strength on Kyushu reaching approximately 900,000 by October, more than double the June estimates. The defensive preparations prove equally extensive. Approximately 10,000 aircraft remain operational for kamikaze attacks against invasion fleet. Thousands of suicide boats armed with explosives prepare to attack landing craft. Underground positions honeycomb southern Kyushu. Ammunition stockpiles positioned throughout the island. Japanese planning documents, captured post-war, reveal orders for civilian population to resist with improvised weapons, accepting annihilation rather than surrender. Had Olympic proceeded against these defenses, the landing phase alone would likely have produced casualties exceeding Iwo Jima's rates. Iwo Jima, with 21,000 Japanese defenders and superb defensive terrain, cost 27,000 American casualties from 70,000 engaged. Kyushu, with 900,000 defenders and equally formidable terrain, could have produced proportional or higher casualty rates. Conservative projection. Olympic casualties reached 200,000 in the first 90 days. This assumes Japanese resistance intensity matches Okinawa. 27% casualty rate applied to Olympic's assault echelon. Higher estimates, accounting for increased Japanese strength and preparation, suggest 300,000 or more. Coronet planning assumes Olympic succeeds in securing southern Kyushu as staging base, but success at 200,000 casualties leaves assault forces significantly degraded. Replacing casualties, particularly experienced infantry and junior leaders, requires months. The March 1st target date for Coronet might slip to May or June. Coronet itself faces even more formidable opposition. Japanese forces on Honshu, no longer divided between defending Kyushu and Honshu, can concentrate entirely against the Kanto Plain invasion. Intelligence estimates suggest Japanese forces available for Honshu defense exceed 1.5 million troops by spring 1946. Civilian militia, armed with bamboo spears, explosives, and whatever weapons available, number over 15 million. The defensive preparations, given additional months, could create defensive works exceeding anything previously encountered. Every town becomes fortress. Every building becomes bunker. Every civilian becomes combatant. The Ketsugo defense plan, discovered post-war, literally calls for 100 million souls dying an honorable death resisting invasion. Against such resistance, Coronet casualties could reach catastrophic levels. Even assuming eventual American victory through superior firepower and logistics, the campaign could consume 6 months to a year of intensive combat. Casualty rates matching or exceeding Olympic suggest 400,000 to 600,000 American casualties for Coronet phase. Total American casualties for Olympic plus Coronet, 600,000 to 900,000 killed and wounded. This represents the median projection. Pessimistic estimates, accounting for fanatical resistance and extended operations, approach or exceed 1 million casualties. Japanese casualties, both military and civilian, prove even more difficult to project. Military casualties, assuming fighting to annihilation as doctrine demands, could reach 3 million killed from defending forces. Civilian casualties from combat operations, aerial bombardment, starvation, and disease could reach 5 million to 10 million. Total Japanese casualties, 8 million to 13 million deaths. These numbers, speculative but grounded in detailed analysis, explain the decision calculus facing Truman in August 1945. Employ atomic weapons killing perhaps 200,000 Japanese immediately, or invade accepting casualties, potentially totaling over 10 million, combining both sides. The arithmetic, while morally complex, points toward the atomic option, but the arithmetic rests on assumptions that subsequent evidence suggests may have been flawed. Post-war analysis reveals Japanese government divided on continuing resistance. The peace faction, led by Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo, sought surrender terms preserving the emperor's position. The military faction, led by War Minister Korichika Anami, insisted on continuing resistance. The atomic bombs and Soviet invasion broke this deadlock by demonstrating that continuation meant annihilation. But would invasion have produced the same results sooner and with fewer total casualties? Unknown and unknowable. The invasion never occurred. History took a different path. Individual stories illuminate the human dimension. First Lieutenant Robert Mitchell, the soldier imagined landing at Miyazaki Beach, never makes that landing. Mitchell, 27th Infantry Regiment, trains throughout summer 1945 for Olympic. His regiment relocates to Okinawa in September, preparing for November invasion. Mitchell writes letters home describing the training: assault landing practice, flamethrower qualification, cave clearing exercises, urban combat drills. One letter, dated September 3rd, states, "We train for worst possible scenarios. They tell us Jap defenders will fight to the death. Every position will require assault. Every building will be defended." The casualty estimates remain classified, but everyone knows they're high. Some guys seem resigned to not surviving. Others focus on the mission. "I just want to get it over with and come home." Mitchell survives the war without invading Japan. Japan surrenders before Olympic launches. Mitchell occupies Japan peacefully beginning September, serves occupation duty for 6 months, returns home February 1946. He lives until 1998, dying at age 76. In a 1995 interview marking the war's 50th anniversary, Mitchell states, "I think about the invasion that didn't happen every August. I would have gone, we all would have gone, but I'm glad we didn't have to. However many the atomic bombs killed, the invasion would have killed more. I believe that absolutely." Japanese perspectives prove equally compelling. Second Lieutenant Takeshi Maeda, 57th Army, stationed on Kyushu in August 1945, prepares defensive positions near Miyazaki. His diary, published post-war, describes the preparations. "We dig tunnels into the hillsides. We position artillery to cover the beaches. We stockpile ammunition. We mine the approaches. We train civilians to fight with bamboo spears. Everyone understands the Americans will come. Everyone understands we must fight to the death. No one speaks of surrender. The emperor's will demands resistance." Maeda survives the war. Japan surrenders before invasion. He records his reaction August 15th. The emperor announces surrender. "I cannot believe it. We prepared to die defending Japan. Now the fighting ends without us engaging. I feel relief mixed with shame. Relief that I survive. Shame that we surrendered without fighting on home soil. Years later, I feel only relief. The invasion would have destroyed Japan. We would have fought to annihilation. Millions would have died. The emperor's decision to surrender saved Japan from that fate." These individual narratives, multiplied across millions of potential participants on both sides, suggest the human cost avoided. Hundreds of thousands of American soldiers didn't die on Japanese beaches. Millions of Japanese soldiers and civilians didn't die defending their homeland. The casualties occurred differently. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, perhaps 200,000 dead from atomic bombs versus potentially 10 million dead from invasion and blockade. The moral calculus remains contested. Critics argue the atomic bombs represented unnecessary barbarism against civilians. They note that Japan sought surrender terms through Soviet mediation before the bombs dropped. They suggest blockade and continued conventional bombing would have forced surrender without invasion or atomic weapons. They calculate that accepting a conditional surrender, preserving the emperor, the primary Japanese demand, would have saved all lives lost after Japan indicated willingness to surrender. Defenders argue that Japanese peace overtures remained vague and conditional through July. They note that even after 2 atomic bombs and Soviet invasion, Japanese military faction attempted a coup to prevent surrender. They point to Ketsu-go, planning documents showing preparations for suicidal resistance. They argue that invasion casualties would have dwarfed atomic bomb casualties. They suggest that any delay in ending the war would have cost thousands of lives daily across Asia, where Japanese occupation continued. Both arguments contain elements of truth. History permits no controlled experiments. We cannot rerun events testing alternatives. The invasion never occurred. The casualties remained hypothetical. But the planning documents, the casualty estimates, the defensive preparations, all existed concretely. The Olympic plan fills 27 volumes at National Archives. The detailed timetables specify which regiment lands at which beach at what time. The logistics plans calculate tons of supplies required daily. The casualty estimates project wounded by type and severity to ensure adequate medical facilities. Every aspect receives meticulous planning. Reading these documents today produces unsettling recognition of how close the invasion came to reality. Through July 1945, planners assumed invasion probability exceeded 90%. Ships assembled, troops trained, equipment staged. The buildup proceeded toward November 1st target date. Only Japan's surrender, announced August 15th, halted the machinery. Had Japan delayed surrender by 3 months, the invasion would have launched. The machinery, once in motion, could not easily stop. The November 1st date reflected weather considerations. Delaying past early November meant waiting until spring 1946 due to winter weather. But waiting until spring permitted Japanese forces additional preparation time. The pressure to proceed November 1st, regardless of conditions, would have proven intense. This temporal proximity, the invasion scheduled for November 1st and surrender announced August 15th, measures just 10 weeks. 10 weeks during which Japanese internal debate raged between peace and resistance factions. 10 weeks during which American planners refined invasion details. 10 weeks separating reality from alternate history where Olympic proceeds and consumes hundreds of thousands of lives. The alternate history remains speculation, but informed speculation grounded in detailed evidence. The casualty projections were not propaganda or exaggeration. They represented serious analysis by experienced planners examining historical patterns and current intelligence. The range of estimates, from 600,000 to 1 million American casualties, reflected uncertainty about Japanese will to resist, but even the lowest estimates exceeded any previous American military campaign. The total casualties, American and Japanese combined, could have reached or exceeded 13 million deaths. This number, while speculative, rests on analysis of Japanese defensive preparations, Ketsugo planning, and historical casualty rates from previous campaigns. Even skeptics who question the upper estimates generally concede total casualties would have reached several million. Against this background, the atomic bomb's death toll, approximately 200,000 at Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined, appears tragically smaller than the invasion alternative. The moral complexity lies not in comparing atomic weapons against doing nothing, but comparing them against invasion's projected carnage. This comparison, while rational arithmetically, remains morally troubling. The atomic bombs killed instantly. The invasion would have killed gradually. The atomic bombs killed primarily civilians. The invasion would have killed combatants and civilians both. The atomic bombs represented technological horror. The invasion would have represented conventional horror at massive scale. No choice was good. Both were terrible. One was chosen. The soldiers who didn't land at Miyazaki Beach on November 1st, 1945, returned home and built lives. They married, raised families, pursued careers, grew old. Their children and grandchildren exist because the invasion didn't occur. This generational effect, impossible to quantify precisely, adds hundreds of thousands or millions of lives to the ledger of casualties avoided. Similarly, Japanese civilians who didn't die defending their homeland continued living. They rebuilt Japan. They created the post-war economic miracle. They formed families. Their descendants now number over 100 million. These lives, existing because the invasion didn't happen, represent the ultimate impact of Truman's decision. But this counterfactual accounting proves too neat. Many who died at Hiroshima and Nagasaki would have survived an invasion. Many who survived the atomic bombs would have died in invasion. We cannot simply transfer deaths from one column to another. History doesn't work that way. What remains demonstrable, Operation Downfall represented the most carefully planned operation that never occurred. The meticulous detail, the massive scale, the extraordinary coordination all proceeded toward November 1st launch date. Only Japan's surrender halted it. The invasion existed not as vague contingency, but as concrete plan reaching advanced preparation stages. The legacy persists in multiple forms. Militarily, downfall planning influenced subsequent amphibious doctrine. The lessons learned preparing for Kyushu and Honshu invasions shaped American thinking about large-scale amphibious operations through the Cold War. Politically, downfall's casualty projections influenced strategic thinking about acceptable costs for achieving policy objectives. Morally, downfall provides context for evaluating the atomic bomb decision. Though consensus remains elusive, the physical evidence gradually disappears. The planning documents remain archived but rarely consulted. The veterans who trained for the invasion, both American and Japanese, die at increasing rates. Within decades, no living memory will remain of the invasion that nearly happened. But the historical record preserves the essential facts. The invasion was planned in extraordinary detail. The casualty projections ranged from 600,000 to over 1 million American casualties. The total casualties, combining both sides, could have reached or exceeded 13 million deaths. These numbers, while speculative, rest on solid analytical foundations. First Lieutenant Mitchell's letter captures the essential reality. However many the atomic bombs killed, the invasion would have killed more. This calculus, while subject to dispute, reflects the best judgment of those who planned downfall and understood its likely costs. They examined historical data, evaluated intelligence, calculated logistics, and projected casualties. Their estimates varied but clustered around projections suggesting catastrophic bloodshed. The invasion that never happened remains one of history's great what-ifs. It permits examining paths not taken and costs not paid. It illustrates how decisions made under pressure with imperfect information shape outcomes affecting millions. It demonstrates that even terrible choices sometimes represent the least terrible option available. Operation Downfall exists now only in archives and memory. The beaches remain unbloodied. The landing craft never dropped their ramps. The soldiers never waded ashore under machine gun fire. The civilians never fought with bamboo spears. The millions never died. History took a different path. But the alternate path, meticulously planned and nearly executed, deserves remembering. It provides essential context for understanding the war's end. It illuminates the decision calculus facing leaders choosing between awful alternatives. It demonstrates the scale of violence that industrial age warfare could achieve, the terrifying projection of millions dead. American and Japanese combined drove the search for alternatives. The atomic bomb provided such alternative, terrible in its own right, but potentially less terrible than invasion. Whether this judgment proves correct remains contested, but the judgment reflected serious analysis of serious projections based on serious planning. When you go home, tell them we were ready to invade Japan. Tell them we planned every detail. Tell them we projected millions of casualties. Tell them the invasion never happened because Japan surrendered first. Tell them we don't know with certainty whether atomic bombs or invasion would have killed more people. Tell them we're grateful we never had to find out. November 1st, 1945. The date that should have marked history's largest amphibious invasion. Instead, it passes quietly. Japan occupies peacefully. Reconstruction begins. The war fades into history. The soldiers go home. The invasion remains forever hypothetical. But the planning was real. The preparations were real. The casualty projections were real. Operation Downfall represented the default path for ending the war until Japan's surrender made it unnecessary. The millions who didn't die on Japanese beaches and in Japanese cities represent the operation's true legacy. Casualties avoided through surrender rather than suffered through invasion. The arithmetic, calculated meticulously in summer 1945 and debated ever since, suggested invasion would kill more people than atomic bombs. This calculation, however troubling, shaped the decision to employ nuclear weapons. Whether correct remains unknowable. But the projection proved serious. Grounded in careful analysis of likely costs for the largest military operation ever planned, Operation Downfall never happened. Millions lived who might have died. The invasion exists only as plan, detailed and massive and terrible. The reality we inhabit emerged from surrender, preventing invasion rather than invasion forcing surrender. The difference, measured in millions of lives, justifies remembering the operation that never occurred and the casualties never suffered.